Like Rachel, I'm a former student of Dr. Hamann, and that's why I invited her here today. Sue has a 30 years of experience in evaluation. She is interested in evaluating federally funded research, practice-based research networks, and oral health disparities. She's very interested in needs assessment and program planning. She's a member of the Needs Assessment Topical Interest Group at the American Evaluation Association, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her presentation today.
Well, it's a great honor for me to be here to kick off your FIRE Affinity series. That's what it's called. And I have to stand in the right spot.
Sorry, yes.
Is this
the microphone is
okay,
here.
Yes. Okay, I'll stand right here. I can hear all of you very well because I have hearing aids. If you're having any trouble hearing me, please let me know and I can project a little bit better. Right now, in the back, can you hear me all right? Okay. Remind me if my voice gets softer as time goes on. So there's, as you can see, there's a range of skills in this room. There are several of you who could be just as easily standing where I am, and some of you who couldn't just as easily be standing where I am. So I have a prepared talk, and I'm going to go through the talk. I have some questions that have come in during the week and today, and I'm going to try to tackle those questions. But this talk can go wherever you want the talk to go. As Rachel has told you, I've taught evaluation for a long time. I usually teach intro evaluation in a 13 to 14-week semester. I have 1 hour tonight, and now I just have 52 minutes. So I'm going to have to cram a lot in there, and I'm trying to hit the high spots just to give you an idea of something. But if there's something else that you'd like to talk about, let me know. I'm not sure how people on the phone signal us. Can they send you an email? To raise a hand?
Yes, so they can send an email, and then we'll have an open discussion afterwards. But a lot of people have already sent their questions in.
Okay.
Do you need the pointer?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay.
So let me just acknowledge one time the people who are especially eager to see tonight. And some of them have heard this talk before. Some of it, they're going to hear it again. Billy was at a talk that a rehearsal that I had for the American Evaluation Association conference a few weeks ago and gave me a really fine tip that I'm going to use tonight. See if you can tell when it comes up. I'm going to use that tip. Okay, that's good. Rachel, as Rachel said, her claim to fame for me is that she's been in both my classes and is one of the top students in both classes. So I hope she changes her whole field of endeavor to evaluation because she's a fabulous student and a wonderful addition to our classes. And Sarah was in the class, and now she's doing some of the things that we worked on. She even told me in her job interview for her current job, they asked her a question that we had really drilled on in our class. So I was glad to hear that. And then Tamara is new to working with me, but we're definitely working on econometric models as an evaluation tool, and so she and I are going to be learning together. Now, I handed out cards, and there is still room at the front for any of you guys who are back in the back who'd like to move up. There's plenty of room at the front. You're going to need this index card in a few minutes. The color is non-significant. The size is non-significant. But you're going to need the card in any case. I've called this talk Introducing Evaluation to Highly Qualified Professionals. Those of you who came to my talk at the NIH a few weeks ago know this is the tail end of another talk. The other talk was Postdocs Say the Darndest Things, Introducing Evaluation to Highly Qualified Professionals. So for you guys, I took off the front part and just left the last part. We have a little difficult mouse here. Let's see. All right. So the first thing I want to do is just go over some basics. I was asked to do Evaluation 101 with the expectation that there would be people in the room who were interested in evaluation but didn't know very much. So I am going to pitch this at that level for most of the time. So I want to talk about evaluation as a discipline. I want to talk about why we do evaluation. I want to give you an operational definition and talk about terms that we use. I want to talk about quality standards, the evaluation hierarchy, skills of evaluators, types of evaluands, evaluation in the federal government, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of evaluation I do and what skills are required. First of all, let's just think about evaluation as a discipline. People sometimes are very surprised to find out that you can get a degree in evaluation. You can go to graduate school and study evaluation, which in fact is what I did. So it can be in different departments. Evaluators might come from different departments, and we'll talk about that. But if you get a doctorate in evaluation, you're usually in a college of education, as I was, and you would be studying research methods in administration or research methods in analysis, and then you would choose a specialty area. And in my case, I chose a two specialty areas of statistics and evaluation. So that's how I'm in evaluation. But it's also true that most of us who are lifetime or long-time evaluators got started because we were in something else, like psychology, statistics, economics. We were in something else first, and people offered us a job in evaluation, and we didn't care. We said, sure, I can do that, no problem. And I can see that a lot of you are going to do that too. So I'm going to give you some tips about what to do in your interview when you're totally unprepared but you really want the job. So let's talk a little bit about why we're a discipline. First of all, we have journals. We have our own journals. Here's one we're using in the class on Teaching with Rachel. This is a very fine journal. This is the New Directions for Evaluation, and all of you who are working in agencies that fund research will love this title. It's Reforming the Evaluation of Research. And we're studying this in great detail and having a lot of conversation about how we actually evaluate the outcomes of research and the management and the funding and planning of research. So that's one thing we do. Here's another journal, the American Journal of Evaluation. We have multiple peer-reviewed journals in the field. That helps make us a field. We have an association, the American Evaluation Association. We have 7,700 members. We have people in every country, every state in the United States, and in 60 countries. I've been a member since the 1990s. It's a great group of people. There are a lot of training that's offered through AEA. And there's also a website that may be particularly helpful to those of you who are trying to learn some new things. You can just go to eval.org, eval.org. If you put in AEA, you're going to get something like the American Engineering Association or something like that. You won't get the American Evaluation Association. But eval.org, eval.org. And you'll get to the American Evaluation Association. There are lots of little lectures on there. There's a library on there. There's lots of information. There's also a listserv that we carry on. I don't subscribe to it anymore because there's just too much conversation on it, but it's a great place to ask a stupid question. So if you want to if you are totally uninformed and you want a lot of people who are really well informed to give you some advice, you just type it in there. You can type in something like, have you ever seen a survey from the Department of Labor that asks people who went through a specific training program if it helped them get a job? You'll find a survey. People will write back to you and they'll tell you something. You can say something like, well, if I'm sampling, how do I sample for a population of 6,000 and only have $20? Somebody will write you back. Okay, so whatever you're working on, somebody has lived through, and it's a very friendly group. So that's a great group, not to be embarrassed, and I give you that quality of question because that's one reason I don't look at it too much, because I really don't have time as a federal employee to contribute to those conversations, but there's a lot of help for people, and you can get it there. We have guiding principles. Here's our statement, guiding principles for evaluators. I'm going to come back to this a little bit, but we have some things that we work on. So we are a discipline. I think our real claim to fame is we're in the Library of Congress as a discipline. So we are a recognized discipline, and I can't tell you the number of people who have been responsible for evaluation who at some point they said, somebody has said, you need to just go have a little chat with Sue Hamann. So they come into my office, and so the first thing I say is, well, tell me about your review of the evaluation literature to see what's already been done in this field. And they say, oh, you have journals in evaluation? So don't let that be a mistake that you make. We definitely have journals, and we definitely have a discipline with a lot of thinking. The important part of that is there's a lot of thinking about evaluation. You don't start from zero. And what we try to do in our classes is to convey to people what is the body of knowledge about evaluation, because there's a whole body of knowledge about evaluation that you can draw from. You don't have to just do hit or miss all the time. Of course, we're always trying to do some new things, but there are a lot of things that are very well understood, and you can get a lot of information. All right, so let's think about why we do evaluation. We're going to talk about the program evaluation standards in a minute. This is one of the things that sets us apart from other fields of systematic inquiry. Some of the purposes of evaluation: decision-making, judgments, conclusions, findings, new knowledge, organizational development, and capacity building in response to the needs of identified stakeholders. This is different from bench science or other kinds of psychological research or sociological research that you might do. We do evaluation because somebody comes to us and says, I need some information. I have to make a decision about something. I need some information to help me make this decision. And what we do is provide information to people to help them make decisions. That's kind of what the field of evaluation is. It's not that I just sit around and dream up, here's something that captures my interest. Really, there's a theoretical part to this that I care about. I'm just going to see if anybody will give me a little money to develop this field. That's great in science. That's great in discovery science. We want to support that every day, in and out, in every which way we want to support discovery science. We don't do discovery evaluation. We do evaluation for a purpose because a person comes to us and says, I need information to answer a specific question. So that's one thing to keep in mind. That sets us apart from other fields. There are other things that set us apart. Now, here is an operational definition. This is one thing I want you to take home with you. Everybody who's in my classes knows. At the beginning of every single class, we drill. This is the Sue Hamann operational definition of evaluation. Everybody has to know this definition. Rachel, you want to stand up and say it just like we were in class?
I figured you'd do this to me. I wrote it down on my napkin.
Excellent.
So, evaluation is a systematic system of inquiry, generally using social science methods. Its purpose is to determine the merit, worth, or significance of an evaluand. In this case, a program, or the program evaluation. It's judged against a standard, and it's judged according to where the program is in its life cycle, and usually that's to make recommendations. Like Sue said, we're giving people information so that they can make decisions.
Excellent. Okay, so that's it. If she were in my class, she would get 2 chips. We were on a chip system, and she would get 2 chips for saying that exactly right and adding all the components. So this is a big deal. It's a big deal to know what evaluation is and to know what evaluation is not, and to know what you're expected to do or what you can learn from that body of knowledge. So you have to have some realistic expectation of what the field means. Okay, so what's in this definition that might be important to us? Well, of course, systematic inquiry. It's not just the case that we do whatever we want to in evaluation. We do a lot of systematic work. We do a lot of rigorous work. Evaluation is not simply the application of social science methods to particular problems, but we mostly use social science methods, which are surveys, interviews, focus groups, review of the literature, document review, observations. Those are the sorts of things that we do because we're usually working with humans. Evaluation doesn't have to be with humans, but for all of you, you've all talked about evaluation that would be with humans. As we're going to talk, you can evaluate a car. You can evaluate all kinds of things. You can evaluate pizza. But in most of the work that we do, we're evaluating something that has to do with humans. So, of course, we're going to mostly use social science research methods, and so you have to be skilled in that. But we also are going to use bibliometrics and econometrics and some other forms of research. But here are the key things. The purpose of evaluation is to give information, but it's defined by the determination of merit, worth, or significance, sometimes called values, against a standard. In the absence of those 2 components, you don't have evaluation. You might have lots of valuable systematic inquiry, but you don't have evaluation. That is the heart of evaluation, the determination of merit, worth, or significance against the standard. We're going to do a little demonstration of that as the night goes on. But that's one thing really to keep in mind, that that is the very heart of evaluation. If you read through one of these journals, I doubt there'll be a single person who will be dissuaded from that goal of making a determination of merit, worth, or significance. That's completely different from other fields of inquiry. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. One of you asked me a question about how do you know which kind of evaluation to do. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but this component of being tailored to the stage of a program is a really important idea, and we're going to come back to that. Because there are lots of different kinds of evaluation, 100 kinds of evaluation. I'm going to talk just about 4 kinds of evaluation, but they all have to do with where you are in the life cycle of a program or whatever you're evaluating, and that's a really important part. This last part, oddly enough, is highly controversial. Is evaluation, by definition, does it include recommendations for program improvement, continuation, or termination? There's a leader in our field, and I'm going to talk about him a lot. His name is Michael Scriven. This is the evaluation thesaurus. Michael Scriven is a very old and frail man now, but he's really the father of evaluation. And he doesn't agree with that component that I've put up there, because he said an evaluator's job stops after you've rendered the decision of merit, worth, or significance, and then you're finished. Now, if a person wants you also to make these recommendations, great. You negotiate that in advance, you make the recommendations, but that isn't by definition part of evaluation. So that's something you just have to work out. I add it because I've never done an evaluation where people didn't want that. So I put that in there. But that's a little bit different. You have to think about that. Just as teaching people who've hired you to do evaluation, teaching them also to do evaluation is not necessarily part of your job. They might want that and you might negotiate that, but that's not necessarily or by definition part of your job. But this is an important definition. If you do have a job interview, you should know this definition. You should talk about evaluating against a standard. You should ask, if somebody asks you to evaluate, what's the first question I ask them? What's the standard? What is the standard against which you wish me to judge this program or this policy or whatever? So that's an important thing. And it does come up a lot. I've told this story to other people, but the most fun I ever had with this definition, a student, I taught for Carnegie Mellon's policy program for a while, and an agent from the FBI called me one day for a student recommendation. And so, of course, I was pretty excited to get a call from an FBI agent anyway, but the agent, I started talking, and then the agent said, well, what is evaluation anyway? Darn, I could pull out that definition, and I was thrilled. Okay. Now, I've called this term limits because we're in Washington, D.C., but I do want to talk about terms because people use words carelessly, as we know. And we want to use words in a thoughtful fashion, especially as we're talking about evaluation, so we know what we're talking about, and we're not either offensive or just plain out of touch with what somebody else is talking about. We just talked about evaluation, but let's look at these next 2 terms, evaluation research and research evaluation. I'm not going to put Rachel on the spot again. Maybe it's Sarah. Okay, I'll give you a minute to think about it. Does anybody want to take a guess? What's the difference between evaluation research and research evaluation? Do you want to take a shot at it? Okay.
Evaluation research is research into the methods of evaluation.
Yes.
And research evaluation is evaluating research.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm glad you remembered that. Okay, so that's a big deal. Those terms mean totally different things. So when I worked on my doctoral dissertation, I looked at a specific kind of methodology in doing needs assessment, a specific way to develop and administer surveys in needs assessment. So I was doing a methodological study of a topic in evaluation. So that was research about evaluation. Often in our journals, we have some study of an evaluation method. Sometimes we just have the evaluation practices reported, but really most evaluators don't just want to read about everybody else's evaluations because it mostly has a very contextual significance to people and a limited significance. But if we learn something about the method, that has some interest to the field. So research evaluation and evaluation research are totally different. In our advanced evaluation class now that we're doing, we're specifically looking at how do we evaluate research, and particularly how do we evaluate federally funded research. So that's research evaluation, the evaluation of research, but that's totally different from research about evaluation. So you just have to be careful about these terms. What do you think we mean by science evaluation or evaluation science? Anybody can take a guess if you want. Okay.
Science evaluation would be, again, evaluating the science.
Absolutely.
Evaluation of science means that not only you're a field, but apparently you're a science.
Okay, excellent. I think if that other job, the clearance doesn't come through, I think you can get a job. All right, so science evaluation would be about the same as research evaluation, but more broadly. So when I made up the title for my job, the title I made up was Science Evaluation Officer. And my boss at the time said, well, don't you want to be called the Scientific Evaluation Officer? And I said, no, all evaluation is scientific. That doesn't help us. But what I'm doing here is evaluating science. So I am called a Science Evaluation Officer. And I think you're correct in saying people attach the word science after evaluation to pretty it up a little bit and to make it more distinguished. I don't think we need that. I don't think we need to call economic science. I think you can just call it economics, and I think we can call evaluation, but if somebody wants to stick science on there, they can stick science on there. All right. I don't have this book with me. We do have standards in evaluation. We have a whole book of standards. We're into our 3rd edition. A whole lot of people came together for a long time, and they worked on developing a set of standards, and we have 5 sets of quality standards. So if somebody says to you, we've done this evaluation, we'd like to know if we did a good evaluation or didn't do a good evaluation, or we're planning an evaluation, we'd like to know, does this measure up to anybody's idea? So these are standards of quality, the standards of quality that you need to conduct a good evaluation, and they're in these categories of accuracy, propriety, utility, feasibility, and accountability. And we're going to do a little exercise on this in just a second. Let me just go to the last one of accountability. This, as I said, is the 3rd edition. In the first 2 editions, we didn't have accountability. But in this 3rd edition now, accountability has been added. And accountability, another word for that is meta-evaluation. So that's evaluation about evaluation. So just as we believe it's very important for people to evaluate their programs, we think it's really important for us to evaluate our evaluation and to consistently try to improve our evaluation. One of the things I just heard from Michael Scriven at the conference, now he's 84 years old at least. I don't think he travels around on his motorcycle. In the heyday of developing evaluation, he's a big guy from New Zealand or Australia. But he's a big guy, and he used to ride on a motorcycle with a fringed leather jacket, and he carried Sharpies in his pocket because he was always writing on yellow pads of paper and on flip charts in the old days, although he's very technologically savvy. But one of the things he said he does even now when he finishes a report is he finishes his written report. He puts 1 copy of it in an envelope to the client, 1 copy of it to a colleague who he is paying from his own pocket to review his work. And then what he says to the client is, don't open your copy until I send you a follow-up saying what the critique has said. I should change or not change or add to my report. And then the client gets both the original report and then the revised report as a little check. So that's an example of meta-evaluation or accountability. Even the father of evaluation is his advanced stage of doing it, and I doubt that anybody would dare to disagree with him. But, he has people he pays to do this, and maybe he'll only pay them if they find a flaw. I don't know. People are willing to do it, but it would be kind of scary. But in any case, that's an example. So we always want to think about how do we evaluate our work. All of you are here to try to improve evaluation. And I'd like to expand on that a little bit. Everybody in this room has been the subject of bad evaluation. We know that there's bad evaluation all the time. We've all been there. You're graded unfairly by a teacher. Your boss gives you a poor performance review when really it was your boss's fault and not your fault. You run into somebody on the street and it wasn't your fault. They stopped suddenly, but you got the ticket. There are things that happen in life. There are bad things that happen sometimes. And unfortunately, there are bad evaluations because many of the people who do evaluations are never trained to do evaluation. So they come in, they do a bad evaluation, and then people have the experience that evaluation isn't as helpful as it might be. So what we want to try to do is improve evaluation. That's why you're here. That's why we teach evaluation in 2 courses, and that's why we evaluate our evaluation, because we're always trying to improve the field with our efforts so that people don't have those bad experiences. So that what people see is, here's evaluation when it's done really, really well, and I can see how it might be helpful. And all credit to you, Billy, for giving me that idea.
1 second. Okay. We're going to do a quick step. So people on the phone, can you still hear us? hear it?
Okay, music.
No, with free online meeting, there are 8 participants in this conference.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear us still?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to do a little exercise. So pull out the note card that you have in front of you. You're not going to turn this in, but I want you to do it. Here's a question that was sent in to us. What is your experience with a qualitative evaluation intending to video focus groups of grant applicants? The purpose of videoing is not for data analysis, but to make a video presentation of important statements from focus group participants for agency leadership to increase the understanding of and potential impact of evaluation outcomes. Is this good practice? Why or why not? I'm going to read that to you again. Okay. It's a long question, and I have it in front of me. And then what I'm going to ask you to do, though, is to take just a minute or two and sketch out what your answer would be. There's some things that I've already talked about that would give you a hint about what you might say in response to this question, and then I'm going to talk about it. Okay, so listen carefully. What is your experience? Okay, you don't have to answer that part. But what is your experience with a qualitative evaluation intending to video focus groups of grant applicants? So just take it from there. This is a proposal to videotape focus groups of grant applicants. Now, the purpose of the videotaping is not for data analysis, but to make a video presentation of important statements from the participants for agency leadership to increase the understanding of and potential impact of evaluation outcomes. I want you to take these statements at exactly face value. I'm going to comment on them at face value. Probably the person who sent it in will wish she had stated it a little bit differently because I'm going to answer a question she didn't ask. But that's what we're going to work on. So take just a moment and just think about what are some of the things you would put in an answer to that question. And this is also a good time to go get some more pizza. If you want to get some, I'm sure there's some back there and they don't want us to have to throw it away. So feel free to stand up and stretch and get some more pizza. Oh, did you guys not have cards?
I've got my answer in my head.
Oh, you have it in your, I want it on paper.
Okay.
You might forget. You can take mine. Okay, while you're finishing that and getting some pizza, let me just say a few words about the focus group methodology, because that's what this question is. So let me make sure we're clear about the focus group methodology. And in evaluation, of course, we deal with people mostly, and the kind of evaluation that I'm doing and that most of you are interested in. So that means we have to learn to talk with people. We always want to include program participants in our evaluation if we have enough money to do it. And we have to engage them in specific ways. So an evaluator has to have a range of skills in group dynamics and group facilitation and knowing what kind of group method is right for one thing and what kind is right for another. The focus group method really came to us mostly from marketing, where people would be called in, and you've seen this on TV all the time. Now, people are called in small groups, maybe 5 to 10 people. They concentrate on just a very restricted set of questions. That's the focus part of a focus group. You're focused on a very specific topic. So you might be asked, for instance, to look at the kind of toppings that are put on pizza. So now that would be a good focus group to be in. So you'd come in, you'd taste the pizza, you'd judge it, you'd have a little conversation about it. Usually we're going to ask people more difficult things. We might ask them about what it's been like to be a participant in a particular group. But in any case, the idea is you get people together for a pretty long period of time, usually a couple of hours. You have just a very restricted set of questions, no more than three, generally 3 questions. And then the other part is you don't just run one focus group. That really is not helpful to you. You run a series of focus groups. And the design of each group is a little bit different because within each group, you want the people to be very similar to each other. But between the groups, you want them to be very different from each other so that you have 3 sources of information. You have the group itself, all the groups. If you had 2 groups, you'd have 3 sources of information, each group independently, and then the contrast between the groups. But it's that idea of homogeneity within, heterogeneity between. That's the strength of focus groups. So we want to keep that methodology in mind. And that's the kind of thing that you have to learn as an evaluator, that you have to know if somebody says, oh, I think I'd like you to do this focus group with 60 people, the ages range from 18 to 80, I've got a list of 30 questions. I can do that kind of group, but it's not a focus group. It's something else. So you have to think, if we needed a focus group, we have to do this in a different way. But anyway, so this questioner wants to do a focus group. That's what a focus group is. Now, we don't know anything about really the people or anything except that they're apparently grantees. We'll just call them who they are. If we think of the program evaluation standards, to me, this question is a fantastic question because it goes to every one of the standards, although I'm not going to talk about the meta-evaluation part of it. But there's an application from every set of standards to this question. To me, the most important part we start with is the propriety or the ethical question. Many of you probably know that evaluation, if you look at the Common Rule or CFR 4546, evaluation is usually excluded from being under the jurisdiction of an institutional review board. So if you've had your training in the protection of human participants in research, we usually don't have to subject evaluation to human subjects research because it's considered to be different from research in the very small definition of research which we have, which is generating the generalizability of new knowledge. So in evaluation, we're really looking at contextual information generally. I call it information in these 4 walls. It doesn't always go out. Now, for some of you who are doing big, huge evaluations like you're doing that are randomized controlled trials, there's no difference between a research that generates new knowledge and is generalizable and evaluation. But for many of us who do small local evaluations, it doesn't really fit under IRB jurisdiction. But I always try to take mine to the IRB. I want my evaluations to go to the IRB. I always want to use consent, informed consent. I always want people to know what they're doing, and I have to think about the ethical question for the participants. If you do go to an IRB or you do have a consent, you probably know once you start videotaping or tape recording, you've gone up a level in your need to protect people. So it's one thing to have people in a big group and have somebody taking notes and somebody facilitating and having a slip of paper at the end that says, here's what we came up with. It's another thing to have somebody's voice on a tape recorder, and it's still another thing to have their image on a video that you intend to cut and paste and show to a lot of other people. So I'm not saying yet whether this is good or bad. I'm just saying it's a whole ethical step above. Once you add tape recording and once you add videotaping, ethically, you've gone way above, and you have to think about the propriety of doing that. Okay, so that's one big thing. Now, let's think about feasibility. I've done tons and tons of focus groups. I love focus groups. You'll get so much information from focus groups. You just can't believe how much it will help you to get information from focus groups. But I never videotape. I've only tape recorded in instances where I could not be there. For whatever reason, I couldn't be there, and I needed to see a transcript because I wasn't in the room. You always want to be in the room if you can be. But if you have to tape record. But the cost goes sky high. If you do a 2-hour focus group and you do 4 focus groups, you've got 8 hours of tape. You have to pay hundreds of dollars, and it's tedious as heck. You're lucky if you can even get somebody. Now, we have better technology now than we used to, but that used to be a person, stop and go, clicking through that tape recording, typing out the transcript. It's not as bad now, and you can get some, but still it's very tedious. Then you've got hundreds and hundreds of pages of text that you have to analyze over that. there are certainly social science experiments where people videotape because you have to look at very detailed behaviors and interactions. A focus group discussion is not like that. It's a little bit different. So I would think the feasibility issue would say to us, the cost really goes up. You have to set up the camera. Then you also have to think in terms of the participants, does this kind of setup enhance or perhaps inhibit conversation? The purpose of a focus group, the purpose of any kind of group, if it's a real group, is to have the group build on each other. So especially in a focus group, you've got people who are very similar. You're asking just a few questions. You want the group to have its own process. The group has to run with your question and think about it. One person has to influence another. Well, it's kind of clunky. If you have to have the videotape up there, you've got the tape recorder. Look how much we had to do just to have a little bit of a telephone exchange. It's not as easy as you think it will be. And it's a totally empirical question. Does videotaping and tape recording influence the direction of your group? But nobody has the money to answer that. So we don't know if it will or not. You're going to do your group one way or the other. But in my experience, I don't want to do that. If I cannot do that, I want to have a skilled facilitator. I want to have a skilled note taker. I want to emerge from the meeting with a pretty clear understanding of what happened without having to go there, both for propriety's sake and also because just the feasibility of doing it. Let's talk about, and then the accuracy part is whether or not you've changed the nature of the conversation by the kind of recording that you're doing. But now let's go back to what's the heart of this real question. Let's go back to the propriety. Again, I'm just taking this question just the way it came into me, and it's probably not exactly what was meant. Okay, but here's what the questioner said. She wants to use the statements from focus group participants for agency leadership. Now, when I first saw that, although I first thought, and I thought, oh, God, no, I'm never going to say videotape. Of course I'm going to say no. But then I saw, oh, statements from focus group participants. Okay, so the words of our participants are golden. We want to hear from participants. We want to honor their statements. They know what's gone on in a program. They know what their own needs are. They know what you're doing for them or what you're trying to do and what they'd like to see done. We must engage with participants. And there is, in many cases, there's nothing as strong as the verbatim transcript of what a participant said to you. But now, here's the rest of it. Increase the understanding of and potential impact of evaluation outcomes. She wants to use the videotaping for agency leadership to help them understand more about evaluation. Okay, so let me ask you, what do the participants gain from the experience of being videotaped and having their pictures and images shown to a bunch of people they don't know? They gain nothing. That part of the videotaping is, as the way the question was stated to me, is separate from looking at the program or trying to improve the program or trying to understand the lives of the participants. It wants to be used to inform leadership about the value of evaluation information. Well, in fact, it's leadership's job to tell us whether evaluation information is important. They ask us for the information. We don't ask them for it. So it's up to them to say to us, and for us to make it easy for them to say to us, okay, this evaluation data is helpful to me or it's not helpful to me. It's not up to us to say, okay, this is great evaluation data and you have to use it. Okay, they have all kinds of things to use. We stop at the door of giving them the information, and then it's up to them. So you can see now, here's my answer to this. I don't know the whole story. There may be perfectly good reasons, but given to me that question on its face of it, I think violates these standards. I think it's likely to violate the accuracy standard because it's likely to change the group dynamic. I think it definitely violates the propriety standard because you're asking people to engage in a process that has no payoff for them and has nothing to do with the program of interest. It certainly has not very much to do with feasibility because it's going to increase the cost and the time considerably. And the utility of the information is, that utility question is separate from what you're gaining the information from in any case. Okay, so that's my answer. All right, now I want you to look at your answer. I want you to consider my answer to be the expert answer. Okay, I'm in front of the class tonight. Sometimes I'm sitting in the class, but tonight I'm in front of the class. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. So I just want you to compare your answer to my answer and decide if your answer is better or worse than my answer? Take just a moment, review your answer. Just think of it globally. I haven't said exactly how. Just think if your answer is as good or better than my answer. Okay, now just raise your hand if you made a judgment. Now you're evaluators. Okay, so what did I say were the most important things? A judgment of merit, worth, or significance against a standard. Up until the moment when you made the judgment, you weren't doing evaluation. But I gave you a standard, which was my answer. That's the expert answer. And then I asked you to make a judgment of your answer against my answer, and you made a judgment. That's evaluation. Oh, that's not what people think of all the time. So I took that question way beyond where the person wanted to go with it. But I want you to think of all the things that are part of that, and I also want you to think of what evaluation is. So even something as simple as a question like this would be a qualitative exercise. You can see all the discussion that evaluators could have about this. There are lots and lots of issues about this. But I gave it to you in a fairly systematic way. We generated a little data. I gave you something to compare. Now, really, if I had set up my answer as an expert, as the standard, I would have said, okay, now judge yours against mine in these ways. Is yours wittier than mine? Is yours more engaging than mine? Is yours more relevant to the question than mine? Is mine more pithy? There would have been a lot of other things. I just said globally do it. But that's the idea, that we develop a standard and then we make a judgment against it. So to that person, thank you so much for sending in that question. That was a great question. So let's move on here. All right. This is a really, really important idea, a key idea that you need to think about. This is one of the most famous textbooks in evaluation, and it's one that I've taught from a long time. The main author, Peter Rossi, is now dead, unfortunately, but the two other authors are still living, and there's a new edition that was supposed to come out last winter that I think will come out, but just go to Evaluation, a Systematic Approach, 8th edition, and the new author will be Gary Henry, Henry, and probably it's available now. It's a great book. It's a great resource. For any of you who are doing evaluation, definitely get this book. It has lots and lots of examples, and it will also give you lots and lots of ideas about if you're doing an evaluation, what are the questions you should be looking at, what are the tools you should be using, how should you be doing it. So it's a wonderful resource. Almost every textbook in evaluation will set up what's called the evaluation hierarchy. And if we go back to the definition, the operational definition, I talked about tailoring an evaluation to the stage of a program. And that's what this is all about. So if we think about this evaluation hierarchy, when we don't have a program, somebody just comes to us and says, I'm really seeing that there's an increase in teen pregnancy. I'm seeing that people don't know how to deal with Ebola. I'm seeing that people don't know how to order pizza correctly. Whatever. Somebody comes to you with some sort of problem, and then they say, what can you help me? How can you help me understand the problem better? And so we want to start out with needs assessment and program planning. That happens to be the part of evaluation that I love the most, because I think that's where we can help program people the most, is to help them define the scope of the problem, collect a lot of data about it, and then sit down and start planning a program. And this is where evaluators use all their skills. You can pull every last thing out of the toolbox for doing needs assessment and program planning. You can look at big epidemiologic data. You can look at census data. You can do key stakeholder interviews. Whatever you want to do is fair game there. So that's a big deal. So before you have a program, you want to do needs assessment and program planning to start thinking about how do you determine the scope of the problem, what other programs have been developed over the years, what was successful or not successful, what sorts of resources do you have, and start thinking about planning a program. Then the next thing that we have in evaluation would be program design and theory. Suppose somebody already has a program. They might ask you to come in and take a look. Is this program reasonable? Okay, this is logic modeling. We're thinking about a program design, and we didn't used to have this. Really, the nonprofits like Kellogg and some of the United Way, they really got the field to move on logic modeling. So that the logic model is a description of a program. So it starts with whatever problem we have, and then it talks about what kind of resources we have, what we're going to deliver, why we think the activities we deliver will have something to do with the problem we care about, anticipating what the outcomes might be, and then talking about long-term impacts. So a logic model isn't, it's not the end of the universe, but it's a very helpful tool. And it's especially helpful because it helps us know where is a program in its life and where can we attach evaluation, because we do a different evaluation at every stage of a program. So when we talk about program theory, you have to erase from your mind everything you think about the word theory, because in evaluation we don't mean that. But we mean kind of a theory of why this program should help that problem. Okay, so if you care about restricting the spread of Ebola, why does it matter that you have an observer watch a person, a healthcare worker, put on protective gear? Okay, so that would be something that we might look at. Why do you think that's helpful? You'd have to have a reason for that. Program process and implementation. At the federal level, this is where we see most evaluation. This is when the evaluators are generally called in. You have a program that's been up and running for a couple years. You expect it to run for 5 to 7 years. Somebody calls you in and says, hey, Sue, how about telling me if this program is working? Okay. And here's what I always say. Well, I will not be able to tell you whether this program is working. It's only been up for 2 years. But I can tell you if this program has been implemented the way you wanted it to be implemented. I can tell you if people are doing the things that you thought they would be doing, and I can make some guesses, some informed guesses about whether you're likely to see what you wanted to see. But no, I cannot tell you in year 2 of a 7-year program if you have a successful program. Of course I can. If you could get successes in 2 years, we wouldn't give you money for 7 years. We would give you money for 2 years. Okay, so, these are sensible things, but when people come to you and ask you to do evaluation, they have no idea what they're asking for. Just like in the back, you're telling us, you tell people to do evaluation. Well, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to tell them to do it. Okay, so, but that's the way it is in the real world, and it's up to you as the evaluator to have the knowledge to negotiate with people what can actually be done, what's a reasonable kind of evaluation to be done, because the person who asks you to do it will never have the knowledge. You have to help them, just like you go to your mechanic. And some of you may know, but when I go to my mechanic, I don't want a lot of stuff. I want to know how much will it cost, what time will be ready. Aside from that, I don't care. Just do what you're going to do and make my car run really, really well. Okay, now we have performance monitoring. Performance monitoring is near and dear to all of our hearts because we're in the federal government. And we all know about GEPRA and GEPRAMA, and we're going to come back to this. Now, performance monitoring is a kind of evaluation, but it's not always evaluative. Most of the performance monitoring we see is descriptive. How many patients were accrued? How many publications have been written? How many staff were hired? How many Nobel Prizes did you get? Well, that's probably evaluative. But anyway, so we ask a lot of things, but those are important questions, but they're not necessarily evaluative. But it helps us keep track of how things are going. So we're monitoring performance as we go on. So we have GEPRA as an example, but let me give you an example now that's been really interesting to me to watch this because my performance has been monitored, and I'm not that used to it. I think you might have seen from the little bio I wrote. I'm back in graduate school now in the Department of Economics at the University of Maryland. So it's very odd to be the oldest person in a classroom of young people, but it's fun too. But there's a lot of electronic engagement that wasn't there when I was in graduate school the first time back in the 1970s. And one thing we have is we have lots of assignments that are graded quickly. They're put up in this electronic communication system, and the percentage that I'm accruing changes every day. So every single day I get an update. Right now I'm at 159% in one class because they're not putting the data in correctly. Well, that looks great. That's too bad because I'm really at about 73%. Okay, in another class I'm in 83%. Okay, so I see this percentage every single time I turn something in. So my performance is being monitored every single day. That by itself is not evaluative. That's just descriptive. There's no judgment. It's just a number that comes up, and I can see it. But the other part I know is that in this graduate program, at the end, for every class, you have to have 70% or better, which is considered a B in every graduate class, or you don't pass. Okay, now it's evaluative. Because now I know that my 159%, okay, I'm in an A. Okay, I know what an A means. I can continue on to the next semester. That's evaluative. I've been judged against the standard, and I know what it means. I'm at a 72. Okay, I'm still passing. I'm at a B, but I'm likely to pass on. So this is the kind of performance monitoring that we talk about. We choose something that's important, if we're lucky. We choose something really important, like the number of patients accrued to a clinical trial, the number of people who receive, whatever they need, a cow, a horse, I don't know what you're giving out, but, whatever they need, they receive something, they plant a crop, they get a crop, they get certain amount of grain back from something that they're doing. There's dispersal of some amount of things. Those are really important measures, and we need to do them. They're not always evaluative, but they're always descriptive. But they're put in there and called evaluation, and we're going to accept those as being evaluation. Because people want to know what are we doing and how can we measure it. Yes?
I have a very simple question.
Okay.
I feel like I should know what GEPRA is.
I'm sorry.
I don't.
I'm going to come back to it, and I have it spelled out. We'll come back to GEPRA. That's a performance monitoring thing. All right, so we do a lot of performance monitoring. Performance monitoring can be good, or it can just be tedious. We'd like to do it better, and the key is to choose something important to monitor, but we will come back to that, Billy. All right, then we have outcome evaluation. Now, this is what everybody wants. Everybody wants to know, how was this program successful, for whom, under what conditions, what's our return on investment, what do you want to do? People ask you this way too soon. They ask you way before the program is over. We know, for instance, in the biomedical research field, it's 17 years from a basic science discovery to translation to practice. You just cannot ask me at year 2, was this program a success? For most of the important work that people are doing, you're asking you have a complicated social problem, and you want to make some impact on it, but it's not easy. If it were easy, most of us wouldn't have jobs. The problems would just be solved and people would move on. So we want to know outcomes, but this is a really tricky part. And this is where you need a lot of help and a lot of expertise like you have. You might choose some randomized trials or whatever. But the outcome evaluation is what everybody wants to get to. But usually we're not asked to do it at the right time. And then, unfortunately, in government, decisions have to be made in the absence of good information. So we get to year 3 of a 5-year contract, a decision has to be made about recompeting it. A decision is made. A political decision is made, a convenient decision is made. And then there are all kinds of times when we have good information about outcomes, but it's not going to be refunded anyway, for all kinds of reasons. That's why we think evaluation gives information to a decision maker, but we stop after we give the information. The decision maker has tons of other things to do. So I gave this example in class the other night. I work on a committee where we've been working for a year and a half planning a program, and we have this great list of prioritized goals. We know what the community wants from us. We know what the need is. We are ready to step in there and start designing the program. We were promised money. Ebola. There's our money. Our money just got taken away from us. Even though we had a good idea and it's a need, there's a greater need. So a decision maker has to make that decision, and we can't be contemptuous of evaluation or discouraged about evaluation just because there are other factors at work in the world. We know that that's true. And then we all need to learn how to do cost studies. That's a really important thing, and I'll come back to that a little bit. But this evaluation hierarchy is great. Now, this poor Michael Scriven, I love him so much. Okay, I'm just going to read you this one little thing. He talks about the skills of evaluators. And he says, these are the obvious ones. Okay, this is his list. Statistics, just tell me if you think you have all these. Statistics, cost analysis, ethical analysis, management theory and practice, pedagogy, social psychology, contract law, interviewing skills, professional politics, presentation graphics, dissemination, and synthesis. Okay, here's his little bio. This is why he says this. You won't believe it when I read it to you. Okay, Michael Scriven, I won't read you the whole thing, took degrees in mathematics and mathematical logic from the University of Melbourne. Obtained his doctorate in philosophy at Oxford. He's taught in the U.S. and Australia in departments of mathematics, philosophy, history, philosophy of science, psychology, and education, including 12 years at the University of California, Berkeley. He spent shorter periods as a visiting fellow at Stanford, Edmonton Educational Testing Center, and the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions, and as a Whitehead Fellow at Harvard. Okay, so he has all those skills. But most people don't have all those skills. So he starts with those as the basics, and then he adds all these others. The evaluative attitude, that is sort of a questioning, a curiosity. If you don't care about things, you don't want to ask a lot of questions, you don't want to be kind of a detective, it's probably not the field for you. Practical logical analysis, do these things go together in a meaningful way? Empathy, role-playing, you have to be able to step into the lives of the people who are delivering a program and the people who are receiving a program to know how to do your evaluation and how to do the questions that you ask. Teaching, he wants everybody to know how to teach because you have to talk about what you're doing. And then he has this idea of being a general purpose evaluator, and by that he means for most of us, you go from one field to the next. It's not that you just evaluate within one field all the time. So I've evaluated all kinds of things. But when I first came to NIH, the first thing I did was take a couple classes in genetics. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what all these words mean. I don't know how to say some of these words, much less what they mean. I've got to be able to read these papers in a better way, have interactions with these scientists. No, the first time somebody showed me mass spec, I'm going, oh man, that's so nice. Okay, and I thought it had to do with measuring mass. I didn't know what it was, but you know, so that's why I went to classes and I learned what some of these things are. I know what I don't know, PCR is. You know, so there are things that you have to know and you have to learn things and you have to have other people on your team. But you have to think about, you have to be a quick study. That's really what he's talking about. You have to be able to go from one field to the next and be able to make a contribution. Our methods in evaluation stay about the same even though the content area will change, but you have to have some knowledge of the content area. He says also that any evaluator, after 1/2 day of working with a client, you should be able to make a contribution. Okay, so you should be giving something back to the client within the first 4 hours that's helpful to them, so that means you have to be a pretty quick study. All right, now this is my list. Okay, so when I thought about, well, what skills do evaluators need to know? You have to know something about evaluation. Okay, let's just face it. Most of us learned evaluation on the job, and then we studied it later. But now there's a whole body of knowledge. It's not the same as it was 30 years ago. There's a whole body of knowledge, and you have to know something. Well, you've all come to this class, so now you've passed that. It really, really helps if you have experience in human subjects research because you have to value the interaction between a researcher and a participant. That is, that conversation, that data collection. There are a lot of people who come to evaluation as basic scientists, and they really have no respect for what somebody says to them. It's like, well, why would I ask a grantee what he or she cares? Well, you know, why wouldn't you? But it's kind of hard for people who are basic scientists sometimes to get back past that. You have to have skills in survey development. You have to know how to develop a data collection instrument and what's important about it. Analytic skills, I can't stress that enough. You have to be able to know what to do with data. You have to know what some assumptions are about data analysis. You have to know how to analyze qualitative and quantitative data. You can't just say, oh, I'm just going to go have a chat with somebody because that's easier than developing a survey. No, it isn't. And you have standards about how you have to do your work. So those are important things. Then you have to put all this data together. As evaluators, we usually have data from multiple sources. So we have a series of interviews, we have document reviews, we have something else, and we have a survey. And at the end, remember, you're making a judgment of merit, worth, or significance. And you probably have to develop a standard yourself, too. So you have to know how to do that. And then you have to be able to do science writing and speaking. You have to write a report that people can understand, and usually you have to have 3 or 4 versions of it because there's a version of a report for the people who participated with you, there's a version for your client, and maybe a version for the program staff too. So you have to be really able to do that, and you have to be able to stand in front of a group and convey what you've done. And you can't be an evaluator in an office with the door closed. Evaluators talk to people. They get out into the world, they engage, and Michael Scriven called it having empathy, or being able to play the role of the people. So you have to have some level of interpersonal skills for people to develop rapport with you, to talk with you, and to go forward. So that's just my list. Then I also thought about your question of, oh, let me get to this. Now my time is up. What do you want to do? I could go on all night. But what would you like me to do?
I'll be up to 7:30.
7:30?
If anyone needs to leave, feel free to leave. Take pizza with you.
Okay. Well, let me go through a couple of these, and I'll open it up for questions. This is an important thing. Evaluand, this is a Michael Scriven word that only a few people use, and they're only evaluators who belong to AEA as far as I can tell, and a few people from classes. Okay, so evaluand is the object of the evaluation. Okay, but we have the big 6, the 6 P's here. We can evaluate programs, policies, products, proposals, performance, and this started out meaning student assessments, and personnel. So each one of these is a kind of evaluation. So last week I was thinking about buying a treadmill. So I was doing some product evaluation, and in fact, where did I go? What did I try to find right away to look up what's the best treadmill? Consumer reports. Okay, that's an excellent example of product evaluation. All of these are a little bit different. These kinds of evaluation are all different. So many of you will do policy evaluation. Many of you will do proposal evaluation. A lot of you will do personnel evaluation. The kinds of skills that you bring as an evaluator to each evaluand is different. The kind of tools that you use will be different. The kind of reporting that you do will be different. So let's see, if we're thinking of performance, student assessment, well, who assesses students? Teachers. Okay, so that's a big deal. How do we expect it to be developed? We expect it to be aligned with curricula. How do we expect it to be reported? You know, we have certain things about what we expect about that. What's proposal review? How do we review proposals in the federal government? We have some kind of panel. We have a study section. We have a panel review, a technical panel review. You know, and NIH always talks about the jewel in our crown is the study section review. That we're so proud of that, and rightfully so. It's a big issue. We can improve it, but we're very proud of what we do. That we try to find the most meritorious projects we can by reviewing proposals as they come in and having a very systematic, rigorous way for doing that. If we look at products, who are all these people employed by Consumer Reports? Are they employing social scientists? No, they're employing engineers. They have engineers doing their evaluation. What about policies? What kind of profession evaluates policies? Well, lawyers mostly, and political scientists. They would be the ones who are doing that. If we want proposals reviewed, we want scientists. We want scientists from the content area that they have to review, because we want them to understand the content area. In programs, we want somebody who's knowledgeable about programs in some way, but knows a little bit about program evaluation. So each of these is a different kind of evaluation. It's one more way to split up evaluation, but the goals are very different, the people who do them are very different, and the tools are very different. So I just wanted you to keep that in mind. This part, I guess I'm not going to have much time to get back to GPRA. This is a big deal in the government. This is the Government Performance and Results Act. This was really a vice presidential thing in the Clinton administration. And some people have had bad experiences with GPRA. I love GPRA. I love the idea that we're going to do some important monitoring. At NIH, the GPRA process was made very easy. It was automated. It was smartly set up in a great way. You put in something like, you know, I like to measure things like accrual to clinical trials, because that's an important thing that you can measure. It tells you something. And at the end, you can say, did we develop a standard for treatment? And so I can come to a good, important outcome. I can look at reducing a burden of illness in some way. But what happened with poor GPRA? We worked so hard. There's a 300 to 400 page report that's generated every year. It's great reading. You love to read it. It tells you all about the federal government. Nobody paid any attention. We did it. The evaluators worked on it. We put our heart and soul into it. But it didn't ever really include those decision makers. GPRA came as a mandate from government that all the government agencies had to do this. You had to monitor performance. It's a performance monitoring system. And you had to report progress. Nothing much happened one way or the other if you made your goals. Most people chose to report on something they'd already accomplished, but they put it in there as if it was yet to be accomplished so they wouldn't get dinged on it, but nobody cared anyway. So then we got GPRA. That's how I say it. I don't know how other people say it. Oh, this is the Modernization Act that came from President Obama, and I'm not going to have time to go through it. But this is a real way. This administration is serious about evaluation, which is job security. So absolute job security. So you're all in the right place. It's a great place to go. So, but, you know, here's a little message from Sylvia Burwell before she was promoted to the head of HHS, talking about, this is a memorandum to the heads of federal departments. An important component of the effort that we're doing is strengthening agencies' abilities to continually improve program performance by applying existing evidence about what works, generating new knowledge, and using experimentation and innovation to test new approaches. And she says evaluation specifically in here. Evaluate, evaluate, evaluate. Here's Circular A11. Somebody asked me about this, and I'm sorry we don't have time to talk about it. A11 really tells you what's in GPRA. It really operationalizes GPRA, and it says you have to have this officer at the very highest level, or that officer at the very highest level. When you write a strategic plan, it has to have this, that, and the other. You have to coordinate with other agencies, so it's not just that you can have one goal that stands alone for your agency, which means nobody can track it. It's that agencies have to work together on some common goal, such as, which will be close to your heart, improving STEM education. So that's a big goal that lots of different agencies are going to work on. So as I said, I'm sorry I don't have time to go through it, but definitely look up some things. All of these things that people are working on now are under performance.gov. Just Google it, performance.gov. If you're trying to get a job, go to performance.gov, see what that agency is working on, what they've committed to, read a little bit about it, and tell them how to do it better. You will be able to, because they're in there. Okay, and then I put a lot of information in here that I'm not going to go through. This is not really my career. This is my job description. I just wanted you to have a job description in front of you, and I want to point out a few things to you. Now, my job title is, I'm in the 601 series, in the medical sciences series, or the health scientist administrator series, because that's my background. I have background in social sciences too, but you know, I spent a lot more time doing health outcomes research and working in the health field than anything else, so I'm in that series. I'm a GS 15. Most of our evaluation officers at NIH are GS 14s or 15s. I'm a 15-9. So it's a pretty good job. It's a really good job, really. If I wanted to move up, there are very few senior executive positions for evaluators, but if I had some of the skills that you have in doing randomized controlled evaluations internationally or nationally, that would be one way for me to move up. That would be a skill set that you would have to be in the senior service. Or if I finish this master's degree in economics and I develop some real skill in adding econometric analyses to my evaluation, that's the way I might be able to move up. So, but I just put these in here for you to see, so you can look at that at your leisure. You can see I put in there GEPRA. Every evaluation officer, you have to deal with GEPRA. I don't have any problem dealing with GEPRA. I take it at face value, just as I took this question at face value. I look at it as an opportunity to improve performance. Whether that actually happens or not, I'm going to use that way, and I'm going to be absolutely earnest about it. I'm going to choose something in advance that I think might be hard to achieve, but has a possibility of a good payoff in reducing the burden of illness, because that's our mission at NIH. Then I'm going to truthfully report it, and if something can be changed, I'm going to make a recommendation about change. This is some more of the important part on this page. I just want you to see that this is how I said my agency will be committed to the program evaluation standards and the guiding principles. I put it right in my job description. Everything we do has to be compliant with the evaluation standards and the guiding principles. If I do a contract for an evaluator, it's in their contract. If I'm doing anything, it's got to be in there, because I want to have standardized evaluation done, and I want it to be done the best way it can possibly be done. This is not an NIH policy. This is a Sue Hamann policy, but now it's an NIDCR policy because I made it so. So you can do that too. This is just some other things. Here are some things I work on. You can look at that. Okay, let's see what's at the end. So let me just come to this last one. So you want a job as an evaluator. Suppose you do get that call. You apply for something on USA Jobs. They call you and they say they'd like to interview you. So I'm trying to answer this as how could you get ready for that interview? Some of you, of course, are ready today. And for those of you who aren't, don't give up. There's lots of places you can learn, you can get good information. So you can join AEA. I think it just still costs $55 a year. They have, and the conference fee is very low. They have a lot of training right before the conference, which is very good training. The AEA also supports what's called TEI, the Evaluators Institute. I go to that every year. So this last summer I took 4 days of training in qualitative analysis, which really gave me some new skills and brushed up some old skills. I also took 4 days of cost effectiveness studies, which are helpful to me now. So there's lots of learning, and these classes are usually taught by the top-of-the-line guys and women in evaluation. So these are fantastic classes. They don't cost too much. And it's in Washington every summer. It's also in San Francisco and Atlanta and some other places during the year. But you can just Google TEI. It's now affiliated with George Washington University. We have the NIH University, which is the Foundation for the Advancement of Education in the Sciences. We offer 2 evaluation courses there, and there's statistics offered there, lots of other things. That's very cheap, I think $465. Most of the universities in town will offer some kind of evaluation classes. You can pick up an evaluation journal any day of the week. Most of you have access, online access to libraries, so do a little literature search. Then there are some really great places. I've already told you eval.org. The CDC has outstanding evaluation. They have an evaluation framework that's really, really helpful, really informative. You can read it. It's easily accessible to you, and they have lots of good ideas in there. The GAO has tons of information. They're our best evaluators in the whole world, and they have lots of money and a big budget. They go all over, honestly, all over the world. They're all over the United States. And so, but they have all kinds of documents about how to do evaluation, how to improve evaluation. Don't even think about going to a job interview if you haven't pulled off some of their stuff, because the people who interview you will have read their stuff, and they're going to ask you, well, so what is the latest thinking from the GAO about how you do strategic planning? Well, you better have pulled that off. The Evaluation Center at Western Michigan. This is a center that Michael Scriven established. It's got tons of useful things. It's got all kinds of checklists. There's the key, it's called the Key Evaluation Checklist. I got one job one time just because the night before the interview, I pulled up the Key Evaluation Checklist for Michael Scriven, and I spit it back word for word. They couldn't believe it. It blew them away. And so, and it's helped me every year. I mean, I just happened to find it. I don't know why I've never heard of it before, but I happened to find it. And it is packed. It's funny to read because he's a great thinker, and he's amusing. Plus, it had lots of good ideas. Okay, and then there are plenty of books, too. Be able to distinguish evaluation from other disciplines. We're not the same. We have a very specific purpose. People come to us and ask us for information to make a decision. Our information is part of their decision making. It's not the only part. It doesn't come from us. It comes from them. We're reacting to someone else's request. And we have to know that it's the judgment of merit, worth, or significance against the standard. Enhance your analytic skills. You cannot do evaluation if you can't deal with big sets of data, if you don't know how to generate and analyze qualitative data, if you don't know how to synthesize data. Take some statistics. Take something. You have to be able to work with data. Improve your interpersonal skills. You can take classes in interviewing people, in learning how to facilitate groups. Those are just usually one-day things, but those are important things to do. It's not that easy. Master survey development. You absolutely have to be able to develop a survey and work on it. Master group and individual interviewing. Learn how to assemble and work well with a team. Those are the things, the strengths that I would say that you would have to be a good evaluator. And this is the end. So we don't have much time, but I think we have a few minutes. If anybody wants to make a comment or ask a question, and if you have them from the phone, I'll take theirs first.
Okay, let's see. Yes, thank you so much.